you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us today. As the least impressive person on this panel, I get the job to moderate, which I'm really excited about today.
But definitely the most influential.
At least I have
She tells us all what to do.
So we're going to start today really telling the story that a lot of you guys in the room know, and a lot of you guys in the room have watched with us over the last 20 years, at least in my career, and that's the U.S. has been a leader in energy innovation for more than a century. As many know, what we've been involved in the development with regard to electrification, nuclear energy, the modern solar cell, fracking, you name it, the U.S. has been involved. But we're at a precipice, and we continue to be at a turning point of what to do in the future. As a lot of people know too, and you hear consistently, that leadership's relied on a partnership between government and the private sector. So what we're going to start on today is really as government representatives or private sector company leaders and investors, how does the innovation landscape today compare to the past? And what are the most important steps we need to take to position ourselves in the next generation of energy? So we're going to start quickly. We're going to do 1 to 2 minutes each on this question. Then we're going to go into more substance from each of the program and each of the panelists. So Connor, kick it off.
Awesome. Well, Drew and C3, thank you very much for having me. Connor Prochaska, I'm the director of ARPA-E, and I'm also the chief AI officer for the Department of Energy. And I lead partnerships for the Genesis mission, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about, and working with Undersecretary Dario Gil as the leader of that. But I think one of the things, being that I was in Trump 45 and now I'm in Trump 47, if I look at the difference between that term and this term, is we just have a very clear understanding of the demand and the need that we have to accomplish and where we need to go in the energy landscape. And particularly being at ARPA-E, where we do the white space type technologies and we do moonshot activities, we've got a much better idea of what technologies exist out there that can get us to hit that goal. And none of this is a surprise to anybody here. It's fission, it's fusion, how we can go attack large-scale geothermal. We're still going to do a lot of white space things and things that are outside of the box, but we need to take big swings at some things that we know can get us to where we need to go. And it's not just power for AI. Power for AI is the sexy thing and what people say. It's power for the United States. It's power for America. It's power for everything we want to do. And how, to use the secretary's term, how can we better human lives across the planet? And how can we lead the way here at the U.S. Department of Energy and the U.S. federal government? So
perfect. Greg, most important steps.
So hey, I'm happy that the secretary was here this morning to give his vision. I will just say, hey, we're lucky as a country to have such a gifted person leading our department. And the president was an excellent choice by the president to pick him. So what's different now? So hey, we've rebranded. So we're LPO, now we're EDF. And I think that really, what does that mean? I think if you looked at what was the focus of the past, I think the secretary probably said today, I haven't heard his comments yet, that we were subtracting energy from the grid. We had a transmission and a grid that really wasn't performing. It's already 50 years old and needs trillions of dollars in order to function. And we were setting ourselves up to lose AI. So hey, what are we focused on now? Is affordability. So we were lucky enough to get appropriations through the big beautiful bill, hundreds of billions of dollars, and we're going to use it to make energy more affordable for America. Perfect. With that, that's going to help us win AI. Right? There is no better Jobs Act than cheap or competitive energy prices around the world. And if you have expensive energy, you're going to lose jobs. And then, hey, to the extent we can make the grid more reliable, that's a form of energy security. So I think we have a mission, and hey, not to criticize the past too much, it was a different era, for sure. But now having reviewed like the entire portfolio, I can tell you the question that was not being asked was, hey, what will the impact of this project be on affordability or on reliability? It was just like one question was being asked, is how much carbon will this reduce potentially? And hey, we're definitely asking, like, what will this project have on pricing? And does it make sense? You know, will this borrower be able to repay? So it's I'm proud to be a part of it. We have a great team. I'm super happy that we got the appropriations because it was at risk. I think
was completely at risk.
Congress noticed that, hey, these projects didn't really fit with what common sense would suggest that you do. And on a go-forward basis, I promise that they will.
Perfect. Great. Michael?
I'd say it's amazing how much society's interest in energy changes throughout time. It's kind of like watching a ball bounce around the room. When Drew and I were at the Department of Energy together, importing oil was the buzzword of the day. We imported 60% of our oil, and fracking and some of Greg's great work in natural resources definitely helped reverse that one. So America can still do big and great things, but I do think one talking point that needs serious revisiting is that we're going to innovate our way out of this problem. The United States continues to lead the world thanks to our national labs and our great university system in inventing. We no longer have a lead in scaling. China is now legitimately better at it than us. They both have different rules, but they also have trained the last generation to be excellent at scale manufacturing. And so when I sit in my seat in venture capital, it's not enough for our companies to invent. They also have to deliver at scale. And so where can the department partner with the private sector to not only help generate new ideas, but how do we take those things to market at global scale that really matters?
You know I couldn't agree more, but I'm going to move on to Chris.
Well, actually, I've just doubled down on what you just said. I mean, the global energy industry is in a place where it hasn't been for at least a quarter century. And you can say the same thing about the U.S. I mean, global U.S. energy electricity demand really has been flat for more than a quarter century until recently. And when you talk about the innovators, they see this. They see the opportunity. There's more than a $1.5 trillion a year unmet market demand for base load carbon-free energy. And that is the future of energy. And it comes back to who's going to dominate that? Who's going to supply that solution that is economically competitive, that can be deployed at scale? And when it comes back to the US, to what you said, we're great at the early stage innovation, partnering with the DOE to get the technologies to the point where they're ready to scale. And that is where places like China eat our lunch, right? And we're at the moment of truth now. I look broadly at nuclear because that's where my career has been for the last quarter century. And I can see all of these technologies that are coming forward. And now a few are finally ready to go. And they're just waiting, right? Waiting to get these projects off the ground. And so that's, to me, the real question about how the industry is going to partner with government and DOE to take this last step.
So back to Greg, perfect segue. So Greg, what is energy dominance, and why is it an important goal? And then what are the steps EDF's going to take in terms of, you mentioned a little bit already, in terms of streamlining. We've seen it with our clients. It's not scary. It's not terrible. They are being responsible with advancing the portfolio and positioning it for great things in the future. But tell us a little bit more, because I do think there's a lack of knowledge in this industry right now on the EDF.
No, you bet. So, hey, for starters, we want to be accessible. So to the extent you have a project, we want to hear about it. And if we can't do it, we want to direct you to the right people inside of government or DOE to get you access to financing, advice, everything from permitting help. We want to be a point of contact, to be helpful with the private sector, because the government can be a partner, but it's really the private sector that is going to drive the industry forward. EDF has almost $300 billion of appropriated capital. Like, I guess to answer your question on, hey, what can we do in the nuclear space? The investment tax credit is between 30 and 50%, and we can lend up to 80%. And so I think it's tough to get excited about doing more than that if you're, and so I think the tools that the government is offering are I'm not sure how courageous you need to be to get a 50% tax credit and then an 80% up to 8% loan at Treasuries plus 3/8 for 30 years. So hey, all of the pieces are there, and I think we're seeing industry line up around technologies to access that capital. So I think the incentives that this administration has put in place and has fought for are going to be utilized. And so I can say, hey, I had you found me 6 months ago, I would have been not as enthusiastic, that it is a tall hill to climb. But like right now, as we're speaking, the Chinese are busy building about 30 AP1000 reactors, which is our design. And by building that many, they are getting the economies of scale. And we seem to have forgotten how to do that. And so part of the purpose of government is to let the private sector win. But when you essentially shut an industry down, which is kind of what we did here, it takes capital and partnership in order just to get the machine going again, to be able to get the economies of scale by duplicating the design over and over again. So I think not to disparage anybody, but I think we've got about 100 reactors in the US running today, and about 50 different designs. And so, hey, what is a sure way to continue to have expensive, copies, make something novel? So like, I was just in Texas last week, and with you Texans, it's tough to bet against the ingenuity of an engineer, or particularly a Texan engineer, which is why we have like shale in this country, for example. But like respectfully stop. Let's just pick a design and build it, 30 times to catch up, and that is the only way that we can drive the cost down enough to make it competitive.
Can I echo one thing that Greg said there, though?
And why don't you also talk about ARPA-E and its evolution while you're speaking?
But we're open for business. If you, and it's not just EDF, it's the entire department, it's the entire National Energy Dominance Council. We're here to help industry succeed. If you sit down with the secretary, if you go have a meeting, one of the things that he will to nauseam talk to you about is how we're here to serve. We're here to help American businesses succeed. I even make a joke with him that we're going to put a little burger counter like they have at McDonald's underneath the Department of Energy sign that says how many people served or how many companies served, because that's the message he wants everybody to take away, is that we at the Department of Energy and this administration is here to help make American businesses and energy succeed.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I want to triple down on those comments and this idea about innovation and when it's time to go pens down. So to switch over to fusion, I think what we need to do in the fusion sector is focus on minimum viable product, right? And not innovate indefinitely without actually building anything. Yeah. So we actually need to get shovels in the ground on a first generation set of fusion power plants to demonstrate the technology and then learn from that. So a lot of the things we're doing with DOE, we're trying to shift the focus not from, hey, how do we innovate to continue to refine something that is actually good enough to get started on, but really to focus on how you access the real value proposition with fusion. So our first customer, TVA, if you'd ask them, why are you interested in fusion? They would say, we think it is the opportunity to have nuclear at the price of gas, right? And the idea here is that fusion really doesn't have the regulatory constraints from a safety perspective that fission does. But to do that, you need to innovate, but you got to start somewhere.
Yep.
And so the key to me for all of this conversation is balancing the innovation piece with the infrastructure piece, and that's really the part where I think we need to actually go execute, certainly in the fusion side.
But just like we talked in preparation for this, that's how we're going to be able to drive down the costs in fusion too, and exactly to Greg's point too, that replication is going to be necessary, but we have to be committed. So Michael, I want to go back to you, and for a lot of us have known each other for a very long time, as you can tell. Michael and I have known each other for about 20 years with Drew, and a lot of our early conversations were very much, how can we make these programs more efficient? Now, how can we improve upon them then? When, of course, we went through, I remember at the beginning of 45, people didn't understand the threat that we were facing with China. Now we do. So now we've had a lot of talks about this throughout the years, but why don't you talk a little bit about your perspective of looking at DOE now, and I know you were around at the development of formerly known as LPO, now EDF, but why don't you talk a little bit about streamlining and improving from your perspective?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges we had when we were at the department was speed. We had an urgent national crisis on our hands, and the tools that Congress had given us at the time meant we really couldn't take action for on the vicinity of 3 years. That was patently unacceptable to us. So fortunately, Congress did pass ARPA-E legislation, and I had a hand in pulling that together with Shane. And it was fun to be a part of some of those early dreaming conversations, but also with the Loan Programs Office. One of our observations was DOE was intrinsically a scientific organization. Brilliant scientists. Most of them didn't know the difference between the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange and some of like the fundamentals of the financial system 20 years ago. That has improved. You get people like Greg to come in and run the Energy Dominance Fund. But ultimately, the DNA of DOE is always going to be science and technology. And so one of the things we were focused on is how do we leverage that strength of helping projects that have new technology embedded in them get out into the market, where traditional project finance investors just don't understand technology. It's kind of almost like a mirror image of expertise, where they can manage interest rate risk, they can manage contract risk, they can manage credit risk, but they don't traditionally take technology risk. So we were trying to find creative ways of how do you narrow what the department needed to underwrite, what risks did the government uniquely have a position in underwriting. Sometimes it gets too complicated to make an insurance policy versus a loan guarantee, but when we thought speed was the primary determinant, we wanted to kind of steal, I guess today would be an Elon Muskism of the best part is no part. And so how do you strip as many layers of process out so that you can get to your eventual answer quicker?
Well, and that's where there's a lot more improvements to come and a lot of opportunity ahead too. So on that note, it's perfect tee up for our next question, which is going to go to both Connor and Greg. The administration has emphasized the need to streamline, emphasized the need to improve and move faster on investment and construction, just as we've all talked about here. How are you thinking of streamlining, moving faster, improving the existing programs you're inheriting?
Sure, I can start. For one, it was so bad that to improve upon it is not that big of a that's
we should have you recorded.
That's the truth. Well, if it takes you 2 months even to hire attorneys to work on a deal, like the private sector would have the deal, diligenced, reviewed, executed, and closed in the time that it takes even for us to get lawyers in-house. So we're just changing the way we're doing it. So like, as that one example, hey, we're going to hire, probably 3 different firms. And so instead of having to hire a law firm for each project, hire a law firm, say for the next year, 18 months, you're going to be a law firm that looks and screens all of our deals. That way we're, 2 months ahead of where the last guys were.
That's a great one.
We can, when you apply, instead of discovering when you apply that you have to do this laundry list of items, explain to applicants even before they apply, hey, here's what we're going to look for. And that can lop off weeks or months. Yep. So I think what took at one point 18 months to get done, it should not take more than 4 months to get a loan done. Like, we're not inventing anything new. We're not really making any new documents. We are just going down a very, very well-traveled road that the private sector does, hundreds of billions of dollars per day. And so it was really just by choice. So I think just to, there's a chance that, like, as a strategy, hey, how do you sort of gum up an administration? Just have things take forever. And so, they just run the clock out on them. And that's not gonna happen here. We're gonna modify the systems which are already underway. We're structured staffing. We're looking at every aspect of it, just to make sure that we deploy this capital, because it's so important for the country that we do.
It's so important.
ARPA-E does this pretty darn good already.
Yeah, they do.
And so, in no small part to, Shane Kaczynski sitting over there, who was the the deputy of operations, and the system that's been designed at ARPA-E. ARPA-E does it really well. I mean, we do things fast. When the front office wanted a critical minerals program, we got one out the door in 6 weeks. We move fast. What we haven't done is we haven't, in my opinion, successfully at ARPA-E, taken those lessons learned and translated them down the street, down to, for those that don't know, ARPA-E's office is over here and HQ's down there, but and take them to Forrestal and put them into the other offices.
Please,
I think we can do that better, and we're going to do that better, and we're going to make sure that those lessons get translated as well as they can. ARPA-E has very unique statutory authorities and things like that, but some of this stuff we can do better down at the big building that we do really well at ARPA-E, and I'm very proud of at ARPA-E. I'd also say that not only doing that, but if I put my Genesis mission hat on, we're going to look at different consortiums, different other transaction authorities, different ways of doing business, because that's what's going to be required for the goals that have been set forth in the Genesis mission and in the AI activities that the Secretary, that the President, and that we want to accomplish. And we've just got to. We just can't work at the speed of government. We've got to work at the speed of business, which is cliche, but it's just true.
No, and I should, I know in the introduction, my title is stated as Executive Director of EIAF, so I should use this as a quick intro to that. The Energy Infrastructure Alliance is a new nonprofit that was actually formed after writing a paper with Michael and C3 in advance of the administration coming in to talk about how we can start to look at things from the past and apply them again to move everything faster. We are at this critical point in time, and we need industry to come together with Capitol Hill, which is part of what this new group will do. So just FYI, if you see it out there, it's really to help facilitate and make a lot of these improvements that have been discussed here, but also expand, because we're going to need the next generation of these programs as well. We simply can't keep up with where China's going right now.
I'd also throw out, I saw Rick somewhere, but we've got, the Foundation for Energy Security and Innovation is a new tool that we're still all trying to collectively figure out how we're going to utilize that. But it's a new tool in the toolbox for how we can finance these things, how we can make partnerships, how we can move things forward.
Perfect. Okay, one more question to you guys before we come back to this side of the panel a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit more about the priority areas for the administration that we haven't touched upon. So I know we talked a little bit about Genesis mission, but what else is the administration thinking with regard to supercomputing, and what does the private sector need to do to better develop and scale these technologies?
Well, I think we're trying to open this up as much as we can with our RFP that is out on the street for siting data centers at some of our properties and some of our lands, whether it's national labs or sites that exist. But we're trying to open up as much as we can and make as many opportunities possible as we can, in the hopes that it also is a co-beneficial relationship, right? So the data centers drive new forms of energy generation and technology. So that's the first start. And part of it, particularly with the Genesis mission, is this idea of some of these companies, look, we'll make it easier for you to build something big. We're going to take some of those cycles, we're going to take some of that power, some of that AI capability, and then you get some of it as well. And how can we, maybe you put the CapEx in, we do the OpEx, and make unique situations that are beneficial for the company, beneficial for us. And this doesn't just become, as people have heard me say multiple times, but it's not just an all of DOE effort for the Genesis mission. It's not an all of government effort. This is an all of country effort, because we're moving to a place that's pretty remarkable, where the Department of Energy is not going to have the fastest computers in the country or in the world anymore. It's going to be private industries that have these. So how do we leverage those, and how do we make those work? But we want to do big things, and Greg does big things. So.
But that's how you got all your fancy titles. But Greg, over.
So I think first thing we have learned already, is stop subtracting. So how do we keep more assets online for longer instead of turning them off? So if you need 100 gigawatts, don't shut down 50 gigawatts that are current baseload power and then need 150 gigawatts of power. So number one, stop doing dumb things. So add instead of subtracting. Because we are in a generational battle.
That's why we need you here, Greg.
I'm sure this will be quoted heavily. So how do we help with this pool of capital? One, you can look at long lead time items for nuclear. That's a longer time frame, but existing uprates for existing nuclear plants, that's an important focus area. Keeping coal plants online, offering capital to refurbish and lengthening the life of those assets if possible. Taking assets or jurisdictions that have that had a, say, predilection to doing intermittent power and sort of asking them, hey, study your grid and let us know how we can lend to replace that intermittent power plan with baseload power. So that might be LNG, for example. I think it's been public that we're focused on Alaska LNG. We have the amount of resource in Alaska is a generational type of resource. So getting that to the global market is beneficial. We're also focused on like geothermal. We're focused on any technology that will make the grid more reliable, make energy cheaper, help us win AI, make it more affordable. Like that is the, really the hurdle to get over to get access to this money.
I simplify it one more step, which is let's do things that don't kill people. If we pollute the world, we kill people. If we don't have enough energy, we kill people. So let's not do things that kill people. Like that's principle one. we can grow off that.
I think we all agree. Okay, Michael, before I go to Christopher on the technology side, anything else to add from your time in government? I mean, you understand the underlying mechanisms. I always joke with folks when they say, we got to move faster. DOE is going to do all these different things. And I always say, we still have underlying statutory requirements that we can move faster on and we can be more flexible with. But you understand those. But you also understand the needs in the market. Anything else to touch upon?
Yeah, I mean, back to my prior comment that speed is so important for me recommending that my companies engage with the department. Traditionally, I've always told my companies, think of DOE engagement as plan B.
Yep.
It might be a fun upside case, but it's not the way you run your business. And if we really want to move markets, we want to get the private sector to behave differently, we need to move in a way that it can become plan A. I do think the department made some great forward strides on updating the way they engage with the private sector in the kind of the closing days of the last administration by a more muscular exercise of other transactions authority, and in particular with the fusion effort, doing a milestone-based funding program. So rather than CRADAs where they're funding up front, they are giving a prize at the end for when you actually knock down a milestone and saying, private sector, figure out the most efficient way to get from A to B, do it as fast as you can, and we'll pay you when you get there. I think that would be a more effective way of engaging with people in my seat. Because DOE was really built around how do you deal with GE, how do you deal with ExxonMobil, how do you deal with big corporations that kind of time doesn't matter to them as much. But when you're dealing with a venture capital backed company that I'm only funding them to get to the next milestone. They very well may run out of money before DOE can figure out how to run the Xerox machine. And we had one, I think, kind of acute example in our portfolio that we had a company that won a critical minerals grant. And then in the negotiation found out they needed to do a full EIS, so 3 to 5 years worth of investigation to build a demo facility. And they just walked away. They said, not worth our time. It was a dry hole, all that
they probably
time,
didn't need that.
hunting was wasted. And it was really a shame. Now here we are, scrambling, trying to figure out how do we do critical minerals faster. So some of that, we just need to update our priors. What were we solving for when we wrote these rules? And then let's revisit them and write them for the current challenges, the current era.
Perfect. I love it. Christopher, one of the sites announced for data centers development and energy infrastructure is Oak Ridge. You guys have a partnership with Oak Ridge that's advancing. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the prototype that you have, as well as how you foresee better collaboration with DOE that can help the fusion market advance in particular?
Well, we actually selected Eastern Tennessee and the Knoxville area specifically for the opportunity to partner with DOE, the lab, Oak Ridge National Lab, as well as the sites we had on TVA as a lead customer. And we're actually, relative to the data centers, we're actually partnering with AMD on this opportunity because AI and fusion are kind of inextricably linked here, especially on a global basis, right? You look at places where the big hyperscalers are looking to deploy data centers. A lot of them, at least still today, are closed to traditional fission. And so if you want to address that need, I think that's one of the opportunities you have with fusion. But as it relates to the lab in Oak Ridge, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, This company, Type 1 Energy, that we put together with Breakthrough Energy's lead investment, is singularly focused on a minimum viable first-generation product with the thesis that the fundamental technology elements already exist. It's a matter of assembling and refining them and using existing materials and know-how. So that drives a specific engagement model with the lab, which is not so much, hey, let's work on inventing a new material. That's important for the next generation, drive cost out. But what's really important now is to access capabilities that the labs have. So for example, with the lab right now, we're doing a tech transfer on the fueling system.
Yep.
Secondly, another great example, which actually is a crossover with another huge innovation that the US has made on the fission side, which is TRISO fuel for Gen 4 reactors. So we've innovated that concept, working closely with the lab to basically create a version of TRISO for fusion that is one of the unlocks for actually being able to move forward with a practical fusion power plant today. And so I guess the message here really is that we have taken advantage of some of the shifts that have occurred here in DOE to basically change the engagement model from this traditional R&D partnership to more accessing the know-how that exists in the lab in order for us to be able to move faster. This is about speed, right? This is a race. And again, the thesis here, at least in fusion, is that what is somewhat unique about the US still today is that the collective set of technologies needed to architect an actual viable fusion power plant is somewhat uniquely resident here in the US. Mm-hmm. And so China is pouring billions of dollars into fusion, and they're doing what they do well, which is starting building things. But there's a window here that we have, because what China is building is, if you peel the onion back there, that technology is really not ready for prime time. And so they're trying to commercialize something that's not really commercially viable. Whereas I think here in the US, we have the pieces, if we move fast enough, to actually lead.
Yep.
And this is a window that is only going to be open for a certain amount of time. And this, I think, for this to work, we need to pull together all of the threads and weave this tapestry of private sector partnering with government in a way that it hasn't before. And I think the first threads are kind of coming together with the lab piece. Now we need to broaden it and look at how we actually deliver this TVA project.
Yep.
And I'd say fusion, just like I mentioned with AI, to the point is the United States has the capability of doing that here, and our private industry partners are going to be the ones that drive this forward. And if you look at our fusion roadmap, the announcement of the fusion and quantum offices under the Undersecretary of Science, we're building those things to make sure that we continue to take advantage of that window that exists for just a very short time. We just had an industry roundtable on Monday of last week about all of this and how industry and the department need to work together.
I mean, the three big unlocks for fusion, right, are number one, supercomputing. And we have had the benefit of being able to access the Frontier and the Summit machine at Oak Ridge. That's one of the reasons we went there first. So in terms of using it to architect a practical fusion power plant, that has leapfrogged the position we're in right now to basically being at the forefront. The second piece is the fueling system that I already mentioned. And the third piece was actually innovated at MIT, I think with support from the department back in the day, which is high temperature superconducting magnet technology. Those are the three unlocks for first generation fusion power plants. They're all here in the US.
And all available within reach to stay as a leader, a global leader. And that's really what's critical, right? We have this, during the last administration, there was a lot of, we're in a moment of time, and it was because the legislation passed. Here, we're in a moment of time because the needs ahead of us, the technology finally coming to a certain readiness, and we have the know-how and understanding of these programs to do big things, but we're just gonna have to do them, and we're gonna have to do them fast. So I wanna leave time for questions, but why don't we go through each panelist and feel free to just touch upon things we've missed that we haven't talked about yet. And also, really, I know we've talked a lot about what's to come in 2026, but what are you most excited about versus what do you need from industry in the room too? So Connor, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think
And get questions ready.
we've hit on some of it. I mean, even just the high temperature capabilities that exist in the fusion industry. ARPA-E is very proud of our history of doing those kind of what I call peripheral technologies that have been the key unlocks and the enablers to go forward. And so what I'm excited about in 2026, to be very blunt, is to continue that work, because I think that's a place where ARPA-E can continue to make an impact, is in particular fusion. I talked about some fission and some fuel cycle projects that we're going to be looking after, because that's a place where we can enable that industry. And then continuing to look at the white space, as we call it, and being the technology scouts for the department and making sure that we're leaving no rock unturned, doing some things that may not make sense and doing some things that do. So that's our job. That's where ARPA-E is supposed to play. And I think that this is going to be a very exciting year. We've got support from the White House, from the Secretary, from the Hill, and I think it's full steam ahead.
And implementing lessons learned.
And
Yeah.
moving best.
I just want to reiterate it because
Well, no,
I think
it's
really
just,
good. Yeah.
I like to say we wave the pirate flag, right? But part of waving the pirate flag is not just in the technology that we explore, but how we do business. And if we can find new ways of doing business for the department and for the entire federal government, we need to share that news.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Greg?
2026 will be a great year. This week, we're taking almost $30 billion of projects to our internal committee, and those are projects that will end up closing hopefully in the first in a quarter or so of next year. We're freshly rebranded, and with that, at some point, we'll announce how much modifications and how many withdrawals or cancellations that we are overseeing, done by the last administration, and really just refocusing on what we know is the best thing for the country. And then I'm hopeful that in pretty short order we'll have announcements around locations and partners for sort of the restart of the large-scale nuclear program, which is an important thing.
And I do want to, when you say, I know some of the misconception we're seeing in the market is EDF and what the Trump administration wants to do with the EDF, specifically on the technology. Do you want to just touch on that so people know who should be coming to you? Because I do think that's something we're getting a little confusion in the market about.
Yes, that's a great question. So one of the executive orders was to get 10 large-scale reactors under construction by 2030. And so there aren't many designs that we would say would qualify for that time frame. For the smaller scale reactors, hey, if you have a complete design and are well capitalized, we want to support you. So, talk to us, but hey, we're not a venture debt fund. So if you don't have a complete design, we can't use taxpayer money to really do what your equity is designed to do. And you can argue, hey, this industry, hey, we're the greatest country in the world in part because we have such deep capital markets. So I think the valuations of some of these earlier stage nuclear companies is tens of billions of dollars. So hey, take that private capital and get your design complete and then come. And we would be happy to be a partner with you. But if coming too early just means we're going to say, well, I don't want to have to explain why we lost money. So we just won't put ourselves in that position. But we want to support those that are ready.
But more broad interest too, right? Not just nuclear, or more broad or?
Oh, no, broader. Hey, we've reorganized the group to focus on what we call verticals. So nuclear is one, utilities or grid is another, hydrocarbons is another, critical minerals, yet another, geothermal. So I think you could sort of if you really wanted to map out EDF, go to YouTube and just type in Chris Wright and or President Trump energy policy, and it will not be a mystery where we're focused.
It actually makes our job a lot easier. The president and the secretary have told us what they want us to focus on. It's pretty clear. We're not hiding the ball here very much.
I love it. Exactly what I wanted to make sure we covered to make this valuable for everyone. Michael, 2026. What else? But what else did you not get to say yet as well?
So the next panel is energy for AI. I'd actually like to shine a spotlight on the opposite of that, of AI for energy. And we are, in the venture capital community, kind of exiting the large language models for AI era, and we're more focused on like, what can it do next? How can it manipulate the built environment? How can you accelerate your pacing through the FEL schedule to be able to get final plans so you can go talk to Greg? Also, physical AI, so robotics. Out in California, you can now take a ride on Waymo up and down the San Francisco Peninsula, and there was an article out last week about how much safer it is to have the computers drive for us. And so I think you're going to see in 2026 a lot of these technologies that have been percolating about become consumer applications that are going to be used in the real world.
Christopher?
Well, like Secretary Wright, I'm an optimist. So 2026, we're going to get the first commercial fusion power plant project financed, infrastructure financing, working with DOE and the government. And speaking of speed, I just want to reiterate, one of the reasons that you can actually realistically put a shovel in the ground in 2028 is that by law in Tennessee, as part of the regulation in the US for fusion, they have to give us an operating permit within, well, actually TVA, an operating permit within 6 months. 6 months of the application. And so that just fundamentally changes the time scale. The opportunity to scale this technology is by using this technology, the benefit of the technology in order to move quickly. So I think our job on the private side in 26 is to continue to de-risk the path to execution. So we have this partnership with TVA. They're going to be the builder and the operator. I don't need to reinvent how to do that. We've established a partnership with AECOM, who's actually the engineer on the ballroom over here. They're our power plant engineering partner. We're starting to work with Westinghouse, who has expertise in this. So this is really about pulling together all the capabilities that exist in this country to de-risk it, and then using that de-risk execution model to actually get this project financed and accelerate work that's already started.
Great, great, perfect. Thanks, guys. Okay, questions from the audience? Nothing, I knew. There can't not be any questions. Oh, there we go. I knew. Or I was going to.
All right, Ethan.
I had to jump up. Hey, I'm Ethan Zindler with Bloomberg NEF. Quick question about the new Energy Dominance Financing Office. And in terms of your risk tolerance going forward, I mean, you look at the history of the LPO, they funded experimental technologies, in some cases had some wins and some pretty high-profile losses. And then they also funded a bunch of fairly conventional projects back after the financial crisis. You were joking earlier about how you don't want to lose money, but isn't losing money part of the process? And what are the technologies you're willing to take the biggest risks on?
Hey, that's a great question. So you probably remember Cylindra. That was more than 10 years ago. And that was only, on a relative basis, about $500 million. And so I would say the risk tolerance is greater than zero. But we're really supposed to attest that we're not going to lose money. So I think, number one, let's make sure that we are aligned with what the borrower wants to do, right? So should we lend money to a technology that takes some vegetable byproduct and turns it into jet fuel for $13 a gallon, when you can buy jet fuel for $2.50 a gallon in the regular fossil fuel market? No. So I'm not really interested in risking taxpayer dollars to prove that we can do something that's not affordable. So we're going to ask the question, hey, is it affordable, and should we be doing this anyway with taxpayer dollars? In terms of what is the risk that's worthwhile, hey, if you have a technology that is revolutionary and we won't lend to it, but it truly is worthwhile, that's why it's a department. We're not the only office, and we have thousands and thousands of scientists to help underwrite, and it might be that you should get a grant. It's to the extent that we want to do it but can't do it because we think, hey, this might be a money loser. I think we'll still do it as a department, but it doesn't need to be with the appropriated dollars to EDF.
Can I just add something to you touch on something that is incredibly important here in the context of energy dominance, because the stuff that is near zero technology risk is by definition a commodity to some degree. And you can just look at, and we talked about this earlier, so Gen 3 plus fission, AP1000, that is not something that's unique to the US. And I think, yeah, we might build a lot more AP1000s. In fact, we should. I'm a big fan of AP1000. AP1000 US will not dominate the future of energy globally with AP1000 because China has it, and it's going to be tough to compete with them on price globally. If you want to dominate the future of energy, you're really talking about the next wave of technologies, whether it's Gen 4 fission, whether it's fusion, which by definition, there will be a first of a kind. And if the US doesn't have the risk appetite to fund these first of a kind projects in the US, guess what? It's not going to happen in the US, and we will not dominate the future of energy because we cannot solve that fundamental issue, which is where does the infrastructure funding for these first-of-a-kind projects come from that do have some risk, but really represent the future? And this is the threat, I think, fundamentally that we haven't solved in the private sector government partnership here, which is the private sector is now, whether it's us in fusion with TVA or some of these Gen 4 projects, they're first of a kind. And are they going to happen here in the US? And is therefore the US going to dominate the future of energy? Or is it going to be China or Europe that actually steps up and does this? This is what we have to solve. This is the key challenge that we're facing.
And we're fortunate to have folks here. Any other questions before we wrap up? Oh.
Hi, thanks very much. Question about commercialization. I've heard Michael talk about he knows the plumbing. So if one could go through the stages from having a great idea in the garage to getting out into the marketplace, could we show how it works its way through these various agencies?
I'm happy to take a swing at this as the former chief commercialization officer for the department. This isn't, it's not a smooth transition. There's not a smooth pathway. If we talk about, when Breakthrough Energy Ventures was created originally, it was going to be this, with a lot of ARPA-E alumni, by the way, it was going to be this smooth handoff. They were going to be super early, have a little philanthropic blend to it, and it was going to make it easy. And that still that gap between ARPA-E type technology, what we use tech readiness levels or TRLs, moving to venture capitalists, there's still a gap. There's a big gap. And also on scale, the difference between my $2 or $3 million per project that ARPA-E does and what Greg does, up to $1 billion or only over $1 billion, right? And everything in between. It's just not a smooth formula that exists. And I don't think there ever will be, and that's why this is tough. We're not doing easy things at the Department of Energy. We're doing hard technologies, hardware, not software mostly, that is difficult to scale up. And when we get it right, and it's awesome, and we get things like the fusion industry that exists, and then some others just kind of, aren't necessarily going to happen, but our job as the federal government is to do the things that nobody else will do, because as Ronald Reagan said, sometimes the basic sciences, even though you don't really know what you're going to do with it, at the end of the day, 20 years later, it ends up being the most impactful thing you can do. I mean, we're studying neutrinos and dark matter and things that we don't know exactly what the impact's going to be, and we don't, unlike the Department of War, we don't have a customer at the end of the day at the Department of Energy. We do these things for the betterment of humanity in a lot of cases. When we talk about our basic research missions. And so it's difficult, but I think we're very clearly being more transparent about it at the department, which I think is going to improve that process and get more commercialization activities out the door and moving forward. So I know that's not an answer, but it's a tough nut to crack.
Couldn't agree more. So I will be cognizant of the time. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope this was helpful to learn a little bit of new information, old information, fusion. I know I learned a lot, and I always enjoy this crowd, so this crew and this crowd. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to the speakers.